Hey, what's going on, Guardians? My name is the Black Link, and finally, we have the third part of Luke Smith's Director's Cut, the state of the game for Destiny 2. We covered parts 1 and 2 earlier in the week on this channel, and today we're going to be going over part 3 and some of the major changes that have been announced as a part of it. In this article, we're going to be getting changes to the way damage is scaling in Shadowkeep. We're going to be getting changes to the way supers and buffs and damage stacking all work. We're getting major changes to Crucible and the PvP playlists, as well as the way some of those game modes even work. There's going to be a ton of stuff to talk about in this video, so let's just go ahead and dive on into it. Now, if you haven't seen the other two videos, of course, there'll be links to those in the description box below. Make sure you go check them out if you missed any of the other major revelations that have come from these State of the Game articles. But in the previous video, we talked a bit about the mod system and how that's going to be changing in Armor 2.0. That's kind of where Luke Smith starts out here. He clarifies a few things about Weapon Reloader mods in particular, just to get a bit of clarification on there. In general, these mods will provide the exact same effects as something like Hand Cannon Reloader, but are also going to affect other small arms weapons. They're going to cost about 4 to 5 energy depending on the mod and do not have an elemental affinity associated with them. And this is of course in reference to the incoming General Weapon Reloader mods that we're going to be getting. Moving on, there's going to be about 11 of these mods. They're going to be unlocked for everyone automatically, so you can start to tinker with your armor sets right away. So you're going to have access to these General Weapon Reloader mods immediately upon Shadowkeep coming out. So basically there's going to be general weapon loader mods, and then there's going to be more specified weapon loader mods that are going to have a higher energy cost attached to them. Alright, moving on from there, we're getting into a pretty deep conversation about the way damage scaling is going to be changing in Destiny 2 Shadowkeep. This section is hugely technical. I would definitely recommend that if you want to learn everything about it, you go and read the article. There is a link down in the description box below. But essentially, they're going to be retooling the way your damage is calculated in Shadowkeep. So some of your damage numbers might look a little bit smaller once that expansion comes out. But Luke goes on to specify that they are not nerfing players' outgoing damage. Rather, they're just kind of recalculating the way that damage is going to be displayed on your HUD. Additionally, they're also going to be making changes to the delta scaling of difficulty between your power level and the power level of enemies when Shadowkeep goes live as well. Right now in the game, if you're 50 or more power beneath an enemy, you see that weird, crazy, creepy looking red skull next to them, and you can't damage those enemies. Well, they call that the immunity wall, and that's going to be seeing a bit of a change. They're lowering, or I guess raising, the immunity wall up to 100. This means you can now deal damage to enemies you are up to 100 power below, which basically just means that lower level players can now actually damage higher level enemies. So, as the article says, this isn't a nerf, it's a way for folks to take on greater challenges by fighting further below the power curve. And I don't know about you guys, but if you ask me, you know what that sounds like? It sounds like to me part of the end game is probably going to be Bungie throwing enemies that are radically more powerful than us at us. Oh boy, pinnacle activities, huh? But anyways, moving on from here, we jump right into the talk about buffs, debuffs, and damage stacking rules. Essentially, damage stacking for abilities is no longer going to be a thing in Destiny 2 once Shadowkeep comes out. These changes in particular are going to affect abilities, stuff like Empowering Rift, the Well of Radiance, the Weapons of Light perk, Hammer Strike, stuff like that. They're basically changing the system as a whole so that you can't mix and match those abilities to multiplicatively boost your damage. They've changed the way that the system calculates damage so that only the most powerful buff on a player at any given time is going to be active. So like I said, no more mix and match. It's just going to take the strongest ability that's currently active on your character. So, for example, if you were to have a Warlock drop a Well of Radiance and then have a Titan drop a Bubble with Weapons of Light, only the most powerful of those two abilities would actually be active. So if the buff from Weapons of Light was stronger, you would just use the damage buff from that rather than the buff from the Well of Radiance. You would still get the recovery and overshield effects from the Well of Radiance, but the damage stacking is basically no longer going to be a thing. It's just going to pick whichever one does the most in terms of buffing your damage, and you'll be able to keep that one. This is to prevent kind of some of the situations that we have in the game right now where people are like one-phasing raid bosses solo and stacking all kinds of crazy abilities with grenade launchers and stuff like that. It's of course a little bit of a bummer to see a nerf like this come into effect, but thankfully it's not really touching weapon abilities. Stuff like Rampage, Kill Clip, and exotic abilities can still stack. You can still stack weapon abilities. This is only going to be a change that affects the buffing abilities we have on character classes. And given the insane amount of exponential damage increases we can kind of get right now, I guess we really should have seen this coming. But moving on, they've also made some changes to debuffs as well. Debuffs, of course, hurting enemies. These are abilities that weaken the enemy. They've changed the way duration works on a lot of these effects, and these effects include Hammer Strike, Shattering Strike, Tractor Cannon, and Shadow Shot. Shadow Shot will now work on power weapons as well. Finally making that change. Thank you, Bungie. But overall, those are the big changes coming to the way power is going to work and the way your damage is going to stack when it comes to Destiny 2 Shadowkeep later this year. But it's not the only big changes we've got to talk about today, because the next huge section is about supers. Now, to keep this section short, basically, Bungie's going to be changing the way some supers work. Most importantly, roaming supers are going to be having their damage resistance, that is their armor, their defense, lowered so that they're easier to kill in PvP. This is a change that Luke Smith announced a month or so ago when he was on that live stream, and is honestly something that does need to happen in Crucible right now. Roaming supers are a little bit too strong unless you're using something like Lord of Wolves or the Merciless Exotic Fusion Rifle. So knocking down their armor a bit while leaving their overall performance alone, I think is definitely a great move. But additionally, you're also going to be getting your super back a little bit slower once Shadowkeep comes out, because they're also going to be reducing the effectiveness of orbs on refilling the super meter and reducing the super energy gained from kills and assists. And this particular change isn't just going to be in PvP, it's also going to be happening in PvE. Meaning, while our supers are going to remain as powerful as they currently are, you're going to be seeing them a little bit less when Shadowkeep comes out, which is a painful nerf, however minor it may be, any way you look at it. But swinging things on from there, next up, we've got some big changes coming to PvP. And some of them are really exciting. Let's go ahead and jump into it. First up, heavy ammo seeing some major changes and a revision kind of back to being the way it was in Destiny 1. Right now in the game, the way heavy ammo works in Crucible is the first person who gets there gets the heavy ammo. That's going to be changing. Now, when a person opens up that heavy box, other players, assumedly on that player's team, are going to have a small window of time where they can interact with the box as well and get their own heavy ammo. This is a major change for Crucible and is something I'm definitely looking forward to. But it's not all going to be roses. If you're sweating at the thought of 6 players having heavy ammo in PvP, don't worry. They're also going to be reducing the amount of ammo you get per brick in PvP for certain 6v6 activities. It's not going to be exactly like it was in Destiny 1. But overall, I definitely think this is a good change. It's one I've been waiting for a long time. Next up, we've got some major changes coming to the Crucible playlist. But first, Luke takes a bit of time to talk about Trials of the Nine. Essentially, Bungie realizes they made a lot of mistakes with Trials of the Nine and that it did not live up to Trials of Osiris. In particular, they basically acknowledge that they took what wasn't broke in Trials of Osiris and they broke it with Trials of the Nine. And because of that, Trials is currently staying on hiatus indefinitely. They're going to leave it on the back burner while they try to retool the Crucible as it is and bring it to a better state than what we currently have. And that's going to start with a few quality of life changes we're going to be getting when Shadowkeep comes out. Which means, first and foremost, some big changes coming to the way playlists are going to work. They're going to be moving back to kind of a 6v6 and 3v3 sort of format like what we had in Destiny 1. But here we go, first things first, they've removed the quick play and competitive nodes from the director. And from now on, if you're looking for a mode like Quick Play, they've added the new Classic Mix mode, which is going to be a connection-based playlist like Quick Play is today. Classic Mix is going to include Control, Clash, and Supremacy. Competitive is being replaced by 3v3 Survival, which now awards Glory. And they've also added a Survival Solo Queue playlist that also awards Glory. And if you were to ask me, these are two fantastic changes. Comp is not great right now. Removing it and basically replacing it with the old 3v3 system from Destiny 1 is definitely something that puts a smile on my face. Moving on, they've also added a 6v6 Control playlist. This is going to basically be their playlist for new Guardians, people who are just jumping in and experiencing the Crucible for the first time. They feel like Control is the best game mode for that, so it's getting its own playlist. This is great. Hopefully by sticking in Classic Mix, it'll feel like I get Control a little bit less than I do right now. Additionally, they've added a weekly 6v6 rotator and a weekly 4v4 match rotator, and these rotator playlists are where modes like Clash, Supremacy, Mayhem, Lockdown, and Countdown will appear. And additionally, they've also removed some of the more underperforming maps from matchmaking as well. I wonder what those maps are. Moving on from there, they've also been working on 4 new variants of the old game mode, 3v3 Elimination. These are going to include different approaches to the way revives work, with revive tokens or not, and of course different variations on how heavy ammo is going to work. The Elimination mode is first going to make its return in the Crucible Labs playlist, but right now it's very unfinished. It's missing VO and like medals and all that kind of stuff with it, so when it drops with Shadowkeep, I'm assuming, it's going to basically be a full testing mode to see exactly how it works and whether or not players even like it before Bungie puts more work into developing it. I think that's a great idea. This is the exact kind of thing I imagined happening in Crucible Labs, and if it gets 3v3 Elim to return, well, I hope they can really get that figured out. Additionally, as part of the elimination changes, they wanted to bring back some familiar maps, so of course we're getting Widow's Court and Twilight Gap as part of Shadowkeep. We got to see those in the Vidoc live stream that Bungie had a little while back. Now, beyond that, there's also going to be some big changes coming to matchmaking in Destiny 2 New Light and Shadowkeep. Yeah, skill-based matchmaking dead ahead. So basically, they're going to be retooling their matchmaking algorithms to accommodate a lot of the, well, let's say, bright-eyed new kindergartens who are going to be popping up when Destiny 2 goes free-to-play with New Light alongside the Shadowkeep launch. Essentially, the 6v6 Classic Mix playlist is going to be a connection-based matchmaking playlist, kind of like what Quick Play is right now. The 3v3 game modes are probably going to have a more skill-heavy algorithm, although they have refactored the way players gain glory with these new skill changes. But they are going to be retooling their matchmaking algorithm so that some of those new players who step foot into the Crucible for the first time are going to be a little bit more protected from being constantly stopped by pub stompers and roving bands of 6-stack sweatlords. There's hopefully going to be a balance to this sort of matchmaking so that we don't experience some of the awful times we've had before with the game taking forever to find a match for you. As long as they keep connection-based matchmaking as the forefront in the Classic Mix playlist, that's where you're going to find me. Anyways, moving on. Like I said before, they've also refactored how players gain glory ranks with these skill match changes, and they're factoring in your skill value to glory gains and losses, so that number can be more effectively representative of skill. And finally, they've made some changes to the way glory, valor, and infamy work to make losses less punishing for your win streaks. And all of these changes are going to be going live in October. I hope you're ready for some big changes coming to the Crucible. But alright, the last thing to talk about in this article is a section titled An Evolving World. Basically, to cut this section short, we're going to be seeing a change to the way content drops with the new annual pass and the new seasons of content we're going to be getting once Shadowkeep goes live. The way things are in the game right now, we had Black Armory come out, and then the Season of the Drifter, and then the Season of Opulence that gave us permanent game modes. Stuff like the Forges, which are going to be live forever, Gambit and whatnot, which is seeing some changes but is going to remain a thing in the game, and of course the Menagerie. These are permanent game modes. That's going to be changing ever so slightly once Shadowkeep and Season 8 begin. Essentially, from Season 8 to Season 9 to Season 10, we're going to be getting, of course, unrolling narratives that are going to create conflict and whatnot. We're going to go through our story, brand new activities are going to be unveiled, and then those activities are only going to be live for a short period of time, just a few months, with exclusive gear and all kinds of things that we'll engage in, and then when the next season comes out, we're going to get a new activity, and that old activity is going to go away. This really ties in with something Luke was talking about in the previous article piece, I think part number 2, where he was talking about the evolving game world and how some of the sources of power in the game have to change so that we're not just doing the same thing, running the same forges every week trying to get powerful rewards. When Shadowkeep comes out, we're going to be focusing more on the new bits of content that we're getting each season. And it looks like this is going to be the way they do it. Plus, they've mentioned multiple times they can't just keep adding stuff to Destiny 2. They're going to reach a limit to what can actually be in the game, and it seems this is one of their ways of trying to mitigate that moving forward. But Luke goes on to state that don't worry, eventually the stuff that's going to be, kind of exclusive, the gear, the weapons, the armor and whatnot, that is going to be exclusive to these activities is going to be making its way back into the game in other reward sites. So if you miss out on some legendary armor or some gear that pops up in whatever temporary event is going to be happening in Shadowkeep, have no fear, that gear will pop up later on from other places. This represents a radical change from the way the annual pass works as we know it right now. So I'm really interested in seeing exactly what this kind of content is going to entail. But alright Guardians, that's pretty much it for the biggest bits of news, the biggest bits of information covered in part 3 of Luke Smith's State of the Game, his director's cut for Destiny 2. This has been a massive, revelatory experience for the goings-on at Bungie, some of the philosophy behind the decisions that they make, and it's given us a real good look under the hood at how this game works. As I've said several times over the last couple of videos covering this kind of stuff, if you haven't read these articles, take some time and do it. They give a really fantastic look into the minds of the people who make the game that we all love. You'll learn way more doing that than what you can get in any kind of summary video out there. But I personally thank Luke Smith for putting this out there. It's been a fantastic read, and we've learned some really great things coming in the future of Destiny 2. And speaking of, we're actually going to be learning a bit more in August about how the annual pass and a few other bits of incoming content are going to be working. But alright Guardians, that is it for this one. Those are my thoughts. Be sure to leave me yours down in the comments section below. How do you feel about some of the super changes? How do you feel about some of the nerfs that we're going to be getting? Be sure to let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell to stay up to date with all the latest stuff we're putting out. But I'm out for now. It's been a pleasure doing these videos for you. And as always, I am the Black Link. You Guardians, stay frosty.